Hello and welcome to Locked In FPL. We're here for Gameweek 3. I am, of course, FPL Nima, and I'm joined by my co-host Luke tonight at Greenback Golfer, one of our haulers who is now a key holder, I must say, super key holder, master key holder it is, right? No longer super haulers. So excited to bring him on. He's an avid Aston Villa fan. This week's episode is kind of looking at him, how he got into FPL, same theme as the rest of the season so far. I want to get to know the guests each week, find out how they got into FPL, a little bit about their favorite memories or worst moments, and then just really talk about whatever's topical to get our teams locked in for this week. So I've already made my free transfer. I don't know what you've done yet, but I look forward to seeing your team, Luke. But why don't you say hi to everyone? Thanks for the patience in the chat as we went live. And welcome to the channel, Luke.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's great to be back on. Obviously, last year I featured on Net That Haul pre-season, so it's pretty cool to be back in with Nima's new venture into Locked In FPL, which is pretty cool. It's nice to obviously just have some casual chats about football and most importantly, fantasy football and, of course, the Villa.
Yeah, I think Villa is going to be a big topic tonight. So thank you, everyone. We're also going to talk about kind of the game weeks 3 to 7 fixture trends for some teams, talk about Isak, whether he's a hold or sell at the moment. We're going to look at some of the watch list players we have and mainly discuss Villa as the episode implies. So we're going to talk a little bit about John Duran, his impact, what you think with the congestion coming up after the international break with the UCL fixtures. And we're just going to take it away and go straight into it, I think. We'll start putting messages on the screen and do shout outs as we go. But I think for the interest of time, we'll just go quickly into it. First, I want to start talking about you before we talk about Villa, Luke. So tell us about how long ago you started playing FPL. I know your best finish was in the top 2K, so 1978 for anyone on podcast. That was only a few years ago as well, so still a good player base back then. But yeah, to tell us a little about how you got into FPL, your favorite memory, and then maybe how you like to play. Because I know I would say that the reason I like to bring you on, as we saw last year in the preseason Roast My Team episode, is you will make more use of the money in your squad, and you do have a more well-rounded squad in general, the way you play FPL. And I find that fascinating as someone who skimps out on his bench, for example. So this should be a fun show.
So really, I mean, I guess I started playing when I sent you the data today, didn't I? Back into 2017, roughly, somewhere around there. I would have been about 17. And I just absolutely loved football. 2007, sorry, not 2017, 2007, loved football. So I thought, right, this is the way to do it. Get into fantasy, usual things, few mates, throw in, come on, you can get involved. You know what you're talking about, this, that, and the other from the pub, early days, getting in when you shouldn't be there, that kind of thing. So I kind of got into it. And from there, I was just pretty much hooked on the fact that I could watch all the teams. Like, I'm a massive Villa fan, but I've never really engaged with the other teams too much, other players. And it just kind of opened up a whole new world for me, enjoying the Premier League, and just went from there. Absolutely loved it. So that's kind of what got me into it in the first instance, and then mini leagues and beating friends and all of that stuff that we talk about week in, week out, right? So that was a massive part of it. And then I started to take it a little bit more seriously when other closer friends got involved, not just people that you meet in the pub, like your good mates that you really want to beat, those ones. So that
I have rivals like that. There's just like, I have a friend before I even knew about FPL Twitter or Reddit, any of these places. Me and him just used to play together. And in our group of friends, we were like the only two kind of year on year, 5-6 years in a row competing, and everyone else was kind of down there, the casuals, right? Now the casuals are as good as everyone. So I just kind of love that the community's grown, and we've obviously met through this. And thank you for being such a big supporter of the channel over these years. Super Hauler, now Master Key Holder as we rebrand. There's also a crazy number of live viewers, like 3 times the amount in preseason, because for the first time I've tried to live stream on X. So if you're watching on X, shout out. Thank you for tuning in. There's nearly 75 people live concurrently. You guys are amazing. When the episode ends, we will also redirect you straight to Black Box to see Az and Mark if you're interested in that. I love to support all the other content creators and raid each other's channels. So shout out to FPL Juice for all the recent raids to me as well. And my new pod, as you know, Expected Grass with Simon, Analytic FPL. So, it's a crazy time for me, Luca. 3 podcasts now. The Arsenal one, Expected Grass with Simon, and Locked In FPL that was formerly Net That Haul. But now that that's out of the way, one thing I want to know about is, tell me one thing that happened in that season in 2018-19 that you remember that was kind of like that moment that cemented this top 10K finish for you?
This sounds completely crazy because of my play style, but usually and over the years, I've always, moved the captaincy around pretty hardcore. Like even on, people that are differentials, I'll throw a captaincy on it. If I really feel like it, if I feel like my gut's there, I'll go for it. I tend to try and avoid the mass captaincy option if I feel like there's a good one in my team. But that year, I just perma-captained Salah the whole time.
I guess it was also an extreme year. I'm sure if I look up the data.
That was his golden year.
Was that the 300 plus?
That was the golden year. I did it from game week 1. I left it on him. I didn't even move it. I figured it doesn't matter if I'm playing anyone away. I'm just leaving it on him. And the thing is,
that's very different from your playstyle, though. Yeah, you're right.
Hugely different. But that year, he was getting returns against big teams. So it just, you couldn't predict it. You're not, like this year, you looked at Haaland last week and you go, Ipswich, everyone's on him. They're jumping all over it. I wasn't because of the way that I play. He's not going to come into my team all season, just purely because of his price. He's already up to 15.1, will cause another issue. But yeah, I just perma-captain Salah, which is crazy for me. And you would think, well, why haven't you done that since? Well, no one's even scored those points since. So I guess,
that's been a once-in-a-lifetime points haul.
Yeah, and he just kept doing it every week. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was goals, assists, and it probably would have been different if he'd have been a forward. And I think this, what I'll get onto a little bit with Haaland. It would be different if he was a forward, but he's not. He's a midfielder. There's point scoring options everywhere. And yeah, it was just straight in.
I appreciate there was a lot of consistency from him that year that maybe hasn't been the case with other assets since. But what I will say is I remember when we first had our first ever guest like 4 or 5 seasons ago when it was Net That Horn. It was, I think, Tom Stevenson, FPL Badges. And he was like number 3 Hall of Fame in Scout. And, his whole thing was I looked at his data and he'd captain, say, like only 8 different players in a whole season in the 38 weeks. But in those 8, it was something like, say, 15 Salah, 20 Aguero. And then it would be like 1 random double game week player, 1 random double game week player, 1 blank game week player. And you're like, oh, wow. Like the players who were consistently up there in those Hall of Fame ranks and doing well like that, they weren't moving the captaincy around as much. So I think your style of play is obviously more aggressive. So you could get the much higher ranks. Maybe you could say you're trying to win FPL and hedge your bets and go after a certain route, like no Haaland. Whereas other people, they're, I guess, striving for like such a consistency or Hall of Fame ranking or like best manager in the last 3 years, which he's actually in the live chat for an era. It was Nick, right? Trigger Lips. He's in the chat. He's coming on the channel in a couple of weeks. He just confirmed he's still free then. So yeah, looking forward to having him on as well. But tell us more about your play style though. So I know that season was a bit different, and I've mentioned about generally if you can captain the regular premiums who are worth that price, like you'll probably be up there, right? But your style is a bit different. And even now, like maybe it's a good segue actually to put your team up. So
brilliant.
I think that would make it better, right? If we're going to talk about your style, we might as well just look at your team.
So it is it's a completely different style. You'll see on there, obviously the risk that I took last week with Foden, just kind of went with it, but knowing full well that if he didn't get on the pitch, Son as my backup was pretty well. I was on Son all week as my captain, and I changed it last minute. I just had the whole Man City fear strike into me, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to switch it and go Foden, and then turned out he was ill. Chance, these things happen, right?
When you told me the vice captaincy landed on Son as well, what an amazing way for that to happen. As a non-Haaland owner, it's just phenomenal, right? Just to keep up like that. So you're at a similar rank to me. You're a non-Haaland owner, non-Salah owner. I only have Haaland. It's interesting. I don't have Arsenal or City defense. You have double Arsenal defense and Gvardiol. Murphy let you down a bit as well, by the way, and Minte's looking good. So yeah, just talk us through, I guess, where you're at this week, though, because it says you have 2 free transfers and you still have no premiums. Do you plan to wildcard soon? Like, do you know when you want to wildcard?
Yeah, so I don't know when I want to wildcard. And I think because of the change with all the, the hold the subs and then hold the subs after the wildcard, that's kind of, I think it's a bit of a year where we're going to find out what will actually work for each individual style of play. But for me, because I do have such a deep team and I spread the funds around, apart from the backup goalkeeper, I mean, he's literally just there in case Pickford gets injured. And I may well pull out a wild card situation where I then do a free hit and then have so many transfers hold that I can then do a mini wild card and kind of go from that. So I still get the goalkeeper in there, not the free hit, sorry, the bench boost.
Bench boost, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the idea being, if you look at my bench there, I've got 9.5. He wasn't actually on the bench. Obviously, he was my captain. There's 9.5, 5 million, and 4.5 million. But there isn't a single player on there that I wouldn't see as starting. Obviously, Hall has taken a bit of a downturn, which was a bit of a shame. But my style now, looking forward, as you know, I've made both my free transfers this week.
Already? Wow, okay. I thought I was brave with one.
Yeah, I've made both. And the reason being, I was going to game week 2. So I went in it. I had 1 million in the bank and I was going to switch. And I always keep 1 million in the bank, or try to, in case I miss, like a price drop and all of this situation. Because like I said, I actually messaged you earlier, didn't I? How do you even look at it? Because I've just gone with my gut when they're going to rise, when they're going to fall, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I'd planned to get rid of Son in game week 2 and bring in Palmer, but obviously with all the Foden question marks, I was like, I can't do that. So I've done it this week. So I've switched. I've gone for Foden. I've got rid of Foden and I've gone straight for Palmer. So I managed to do that, and then I have downgraded Jacob Murphy to our good old friend Mr. Rogers, who we will discuss. No doubt.
I'm excited. I'm sure we're going to be talking about Villa momentarily, because I'm not going to show my team. I just wanted to show yours. And for anyone who's not seen these graphics, it's obviously from FPL team, from Peter, who was the guest last week. If you didn't see that episode, because there's like nearly 150 people watching live now, which is crazy. It's the largest I think it's ever been for the channel in the 4 or 5 years. So maybe, live streaming on X is a good idea going forwards. Do let me know after if you saw this on X, and if you want to see it stream here more often, we'll try to do the multi-destination streaming going forwards.
Yeah, put it this way. If you want a bit of FPL class, this wasn't the week to join in. You've got me, and Peter was awesome last week, wasn't he, with his FPL
I remember
team.
You messaged me straight after and you were like, oh my God, like Peter's come on and he's built this amazing tool to help everyone, and what a great manager. And then you've got me coming on as just someone who's been a previous viewer and a friend. So, but obviously this shows you're a supporter of the channel. It's probably a good time now with so many watching this far in. If you are new around here, most of our viewers are non-subscribers, so please consider subscribing and support the channel. I'll be doing this every week, every Wednesday, with different guests. And let me know if there's any guests you want to see. So do reach out if there's specific people you want to see on. As I mentioned, Nick Triggerlips is coming on soon. We have a FPL Fran coming. We have FPL Mayor Brad coming. We've got a lot of people lined up. But as you say, Luke, I don't want you to feel like that you kind of sandwiched in between all these content creators. For me, every week is just as good. And you're here for the week with the most live viewers. So I'm glad you're here so that they can see what the vibe is. It's a casual fireside chat with friends, learn about different managers and their play style, and then talk about the main dilemmas of the week, right? Should we do a couple of shout outs before we maybe go into Villa and then come back to the Premier League transfer deadline day stuff?
Yeah, sounds good.
Let's do some shout outs because we're 13 minutes in. I'll timestamp this for the podcast listeners. So if you do want to skip ahead, you can see what the next timestamp will be to skip the live viewer shout outs. Sorry if you're on X and you can't comment or we can't see your comments. Do consider coming to YouTube and comment and we'll answer your questions. So first person in the chat, Trigger Talks FPL. Is this going to scare me? I don't own any Villa players. You're about to find out, mate. Getty FPL, good evening all. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Midnight Mule FPL. Watkins is overrated. Bailey is the way to go. Interesting one. A lot of Villa talk here, so sounds good. No worries. So Luke's just going to go and deal with the kids real quick. I'll keep doing the shout outs and then I'll keep talking until he comes back. But as we go through the shout outs, just if I don't want to miss anyone, sorry. So let's keep going back to that. Howdy Splitter. Good to see BW Splitter. Howdy all. Elron Cupboard, evening. Power versus Concert. I'll start this. As always, Elron and everyone else will start the questions for the Q&A. We'll timestamp that at the end. So if you can't watch the whole video, you will be able to come back and just see the Q&A at the end. So what else do we have? We have Watching Forest, Sells is Safe. That's from Dave. FPL Maggot, evening. Thank you for tuning in, buddy. Midnight Meal has some more comments about Power versus Concert. We'll come back to that. Gareth Pashley. Hey, Paul. Good to see you, buddy. Claire FPL. Newcastle leading after just 19 seconds tonight. Yeah, so for podcast viewers, to timestamp this, we're going live on the Wednesday. It's the cup games are happening in round 2, I believe. So keep us updated in the chat. We have who else? We have Bobby Love. Good to see you, buddy. Sup, nerds. Hope everyone is having a lovely evening. Good to see you, mate. We've got Geddy's question we'll come back to later. He says, will Duran take more minutes off Watkins this season? We've got Catherine, another one of our key holders, as I call them now. I keep trying to call you guys haulers accidentally from the net that whole days. Hiya, guys. Evening. Good to see you. Trigger Talks FPL, Little Wave. Darnish will start your question for the Q&A. Isak for Watkins. Just going to have a quick look that we've not missed anyone, guys. And then we'll get back into the show. So who else do we have? We have Leon. Hope there is no Villa slander. I am on free Villa. So yeah, no worries, mate. The good news is we have a big Villa fan when he comes back from putting the kids back to bed. Anyone on podcast, you will notice an empty chair at this timestamp on YouTube, but it's all good. We know I talk too much, so I'll let him talk a lot more when he comes back and you can hear more from the Villa fan. Until then, we'll do a few more shout outs. And I've got one Villa. I've got one Villa, Leon. So I had Rodgers pre-game week 1. He was my kind of shout for breakout star of the season. I don't know if it's going to be all kind of like, what do they say? They call it all fart and no poo, right? So like, I worry that he's like the ball carrier. He's doing all the work, getting the ball up the pitch. And so far, like, it's not really resulting in much like expected goals, expected assists. So I worry that he's flogging the ball off and then whoever he gives it to is getting the assist. So maybe the opponents they've had, obviously, I watched the game against Arsenal, of course, and it's a tough opponent for sure. So maybe it will look better with the good fixtures coming. I am considering Watkins. I considered Leon Bailey when I saw Nkunku on Sunday. So far, I'm on one Villa, though. And I have 2. I have Konsa as well. I started with Ezri Konsa. I forgot. He's now come in for Lewis Hall on my team. But we'll wait for Luke to tell us his team as well in terms of his opinion on Villa. When he comes back, I've got some stats up on the screen. So I've put in kind of the main attackers. I've got Watkins, Bailey, Rodgers. We've got a few of the fringe players in Duran, Ramsey, Barkley, and Buendia. Got their stats sorted by expected goal involvement. Obviously, a very small sample size, but I hope to keep using these this season. We'll talk a little bit about John Duran, Ollie Watkins. At the moment, their heat maps are very similar. My questions for Luke will be whether kind of we can see Watkins getting subbed off more this season and earlier, or if actually there is a chance they will play together in a front 2. He will also let us know that obviously in the predicted points here, Duran's on kind of like 0, so his expected minutes are super low. But he expects that with the 8 extra fixtures in the midweek, that things will be very crazy in terms of rotation. So he has strong views, I'm sure, and we'll learn more about that from him as well when he comes back about that section. Let me just see what else we have. Then there's some stuff around Alexander Isak. So Isak we're going to talk about because for me, he's someone who had at the start of the season. I really thought he was more important to me than, say, one of Salah or Haaland. I kind of thought he was a lock in my team way earlier. As you know, the first episode of Locked In FPL was when TT came on, the Newcastle fan. So I have like Gordon, Isak, Hall. I'm really in the Newcastle world. Isak at the moment, and we'll talk about it when Luke comes back, he's an easy exit, right, to someone like Havertz, to someone like Watkins with the fixtures over Havertz. There's also the downgrade. So I have Muniz. And I really wanted Pedro to start the season. So Ja Pedro is another shout as well that we can look at. But overall, we'll talk about Isak because he's relevant in that sense that he is a current common transfer trend, most sold player. You know, my casual friends from work, they're messaging me going, oh, there's rumors Isak will drop this week. And I'm like cracking up that it's hilarious for me because he knows I make videos and like he's telling me there's rumors. And I'm like, it's not rumors, man. Like, you go to the FPL homepage, it's like the most sold player. So if you're watching Benji, like, trust me, I know he's dropping, but I got Isak for this fixture. So I'll just say this while we wait for Luke, because in reality, maybe I will go to the Isak slide actually, just to have the data while we talk about this. This is currently the forwards over the next few game weeks up to game week 10 by expected points. And Isak is still second, but the main thing I want to call out is 6.6 in game week 3. This is actually like his highest between now and game week 10. And for me, like there's no world I can sell him in this fixture. It's just this fixture, like it reminds me of the Jacob Murphy meme as well, when they did what they did to Spurs last time. So, you know, this is a great fixture, but I am very considering selling him afterwards. So even though he is up there, I think for the price, Newcastle as a whole, I have not been too convinced. I think I was a bit too heavy on them and fell in love with them. So similar to Leon, who has the triple Villa in the chat, I was very aggressive on Newcastle, and maybe this is my next move. Like maybe Isak to Watkins can change it up a bit. But so yeah, Luke, now that you're back, I was just kind of telling people about my stuff about Isak. So I don't think we'll come back to Isak unless you have some thoughts. But really, just Villa as well. But yeah, talk about Isak first. Yeah, talk about Isak first, because then I can timestamp the Isak conversation at least.
Right, and I'm just going to throw this at you. So if he, and I do appreciate it's an if, but if you look at the goal that he should have assisted in the second game, fluff of a miss, right? So if he'd returned in both the two games, would this expected points affect you as much as it does right now? Is it the fact that he blanked second week that is then put in these?
No. So I actually think so. I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's too early to sell him. So like, even if like, obviously I think it's kind of good for me because I expect him to do well against Spurs, obviously. So I'm willing to take that price drop, because in reality, he's so expensive already that whenever I do sell him, I will free up a significant amount of money to have a more well-rounded squad, because I have Haaland, right? So I've spent an extra 2.5 million on what you've spent on your premiums in that slot. And then like maybe another 2.5 million from Son and bloody the Salah level slot. So you've obviously got a lot more money for a better team. I'm looking at my team, and suddenly there's Barco, there's Lewis Hall, and Kunku was having issues. You know, like, so I'm looking at it and I'm like, so who's my weak link? And maybe it's a good time if I put up my screen, actually, I guess, while we talk about it.
Yeah,
I have the FPL team version up of my squad with the transfer already made. So hopefully this works on the Twitter version as well. Let's see. So yeah, I've been using the FPL team on, obviously, since he came on as a guest last week. It was really nice seeing all the different ways you can use his app that I didn't like even necessarily know about. Yeah, so I've made one move and I kind of regret it already. I'm not going to lie. I kind of wanted to do team value. And you know, I'm a sucker for transfer trends. So Nkunku was going down, Smith Rowe was going up. I already had Muniz, and like, as you can see, Smith Rowe's on my bench despite the transfer in for Nkunku this week. And I would have been happy to roll, if I'm honest with you, and have free transfers next week. I know that's another topic for today. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Maybe we should talk about the free transfers. Like, was I wrong to do that? Like, they talk about how like the price over the course of a season is worth like, say, 1 point. Like Simon was saying yesterday on the Expected Grass episode that I wasn't on with Fran. They were saying like, you know, every 0.1 or 0.2 team value is like, and I've obviously saved 0.2, but I'm like, I'm not even starting Smith Rowe. Like, I would have wanted Minte, but then I was like, I don't want to go into Brighton the week before I want to play them. So then it's like, what would you have done in my shoes? Is my question for you, Luke. Would you have rolled and just taken the price drops, or would you have bought a different midfielder to Smith Rowe altogether? Like Leon Bailey was on the table, and I wish I'd spoken to you before I made this move, because I think he's a way better pick over the next 4 weeks than Smith Rowe.
I think the fact that you also have Muniz, like you said, to have double dip in the Fulham attack is, I'm not too keen on that. You know, I think they're a solid team, and I mean, the Carabao Cup, they put out their second team was quality, so they've got depth, but I don't think they're going to be free flowing goal scoring machines. I mean, Muniz, I think, is overrated anyway. That's my personal opinion on him.
Hindu Monkey, if you're listening, he's coming on soon too. If you're listening, Hindu Monkey, your Muniz train has derailed before it even left the station. I just hope I get a haul on the way out. That's all I can say.
No, I can't. Yeah. Do you know what? Anyone playing Ipswich, you know, promoted teams, you can look at it and say, yeah, they could score. So you've done it on fixtures. I know that. Like Fulham's fixtures were great early doors, weren't they? Like looking at the first 4 or 5. So you can see where you're on him. But going Smith Rowe, I think that's just the Arsenal link again. You've got to get away from it. Everything.
You can see I'm playing Rodgers, right? So it's kind of, maybe that's a good segue into Villa, because I had Rodgers, as I said. I can see people are piling on despite the blanks. When you were off air, I was actually talking about his numbers. So this might be a good time to go back to this. I was kind of saying that really, like, his XGI per 90 or per minute, or whatever, per start has not been great. Yep. It's like about 0.25, 0.28 or so. He's accumulated in total 0.5, right? So what, 0.25 per game on average. You got Watkins on 0.9, Bailey on 0.5 with him, but 1.5 million more.
Yeah.
And Duran with them. What are your thoughts on the top 4? I don't think Ramsey, Barkley, and Buendia, no one in the chat, I don't think, is considering bringing them in. Maybe you can add around the rotation. So what I set up when you left, actually, I should tell you what I told everyone you were going to talk about, so you know. I said you're going to talk about kind of the rotation with the 8 extra fixtures and what impact you think that will have. You're going to talk about whether you think Watkins will start to be sub more early, or if he's going to be playing with Duran to chase games. Obviously, the expected minutes for Duran, how you think that might change after the international break. So these are kind of, let me know if you want to see any of those specific slides as you go. But I thought 25 minutes in timestamp, if you're on podcast and you want to see the data visually, come back and this will be the Villa slot. This will be the bulk of the show, right? And then we'll kind of take questions and general chat as we go.
I think you straight away when you look at it, and we'll go bottom to top quickly from that table. Just Buendia, love the guy. I think he's an excellent player, but obviously injuries coming back. He's not going to feature for a good while anyway. If he gets up to speed, it was a horrible injury. Barkley has come in, and he has simply come in to play. In my opinion, he's an off the bench kind of guy. He will play all the Carabao Cup games. He will come on if we've got a game sewn up. You know, he's not going to be playing regularly. Ramsey, there's a bit more of a debate on. You could have. He's a good player, top quality, but it's. Again, is he starting at the moment? No, he's not. Is he coming off the bench and having a big impact? Probably not as big as you would like. And then we get into the 4 that I would focus on. And Rodgers, okay, if you look at it from a stats perspective, I'd agree with you. You look at it, it's not overly clever. But then you see his price. And then you actually, if you've sat and watched the games and you see how he played in that Arsenal game, I think he was Villa's shining light by a mile. I don't think anybody else even looked close to how classy he was on that pitch against players that are obviously pushing to win the league this year. I actually think Arsenal will win the league this year.
And the whole game, right, I felt that our entire game plan was to try and make it so that he would have the least time with the least space to transition as possible. Like, it was like if we contain him, that was the only way to stop you kind of thing. And he still managed, despite that, to do so well. So he stood out for me even in that game. And that's what's crazy, because normally a player blanks like that twice and they're getting a price drop. He's got the price rise to 5.1, right?
Yeah, he's super incredible in tight areas. And I think, obviously, with the style and the positions he's going to be picking up in there, he will score. And fantasy football isn't about scoring wonder goals. You don't get 10 points for a wonder goal. I get that. But he is going to pop up and create things. And he's only going to get better the more he gets used to these players. Like, he's still quite new to the team. If you look at it in its grandest form, you know, we brought him in. He's a young guy. He's improving all the time. He is my star in the Villa team. So obviously at 5 million and their fixtures, I just think if you don't have him, it's a bit of a no-brainer. And with my play style, he's a must-have.
Dude, but that's why I'm annoyed that I sold Nkunku for Smith Rowe, because I already had Rodgers. So it's like I didn't know where to go. And as I say, I looked at Leon Bailey, I looked at Minte. If I'd got Leon Bailey, I would have benched Muniz. But then in my head, I was thinking, but I got Muniz for this game, and he's actually taken loads of shots, and he's been unfortunate. And I'm like, I trust Muniz's minutes more than Smith Rowe. So what I justified to myself was that I'm going to get the 0.2 million, right? Yep. And I will likely never play Smith Rowe till I wild card. But in the prayer that even if he still gets points, I've still got one of the higher owned players, and hopefully he'll keep rising. And maybe if I do wild card by game week 6, like, I'll gain something, right? But that's why I regret it, because part of me is thinking this was my chance to have free transfers for the first time.
Yeah, we're going to hit on that. The 3 free transfers. I mean, for my game style, the more you can spread your team out, the less chance you have of making transfers. Because look at the Barco instance. When I sent you my team for Roast My Team, he was in there. I don't know whether you noticed, he was in there, and I couldn't do it. That was my gamble, and I can't do it. At the start of the season, it's even worse. I think once you've had 4 or 5 game weeks, like we say, we know more and more information. You get a good feeling of where the team's going, who's going to start. It's like Newcastle, Lewis Hall, will he come back into the team? I'm not sure, probably. But if they sign a big centre-back, is Dan Burn going to play left-back again? Probably.
There was some mentions of the height, wasn't there? So about the specific matchup there. I do think if Trippier is going to get back in and play over Livramento, maybe we see Lewis Hall come back in. So it might be like pairings. So it could be that when Livramento plays, that's when you have kind of the other fullback pairing. I do wonder what will happen, but I have Lewis Hall, as you know, and he was one of my punts. He was one of my differentials. Really wanted points, and I got some points in Gameweek 1. I'll take that. It is what it is. He's benched now, so I'm playing Ezri Konsa. I'm playing Morgan Rogers, and I don't think I'll be doing Isak to Watkins. So I won't be triple Villa this week, but there is a world in which I could end up with Leon Bailey still or Watkins next week, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But you talked about the players there, so Rogers specifically.
Now we're into the top three, so we'll talk about those on the information there. So we got Duran, Bailey, Watkins. I think if we start with Bailey, because obviously he's another midfielder in there, I think for me he's a great player, but I think his price is too high for what he actually for his output. I think there's a few that fall into this bracket. I think Gibbs White's a similar type of player. He's 6.5, but for me, it's too high for what they actually give you. I think, and the why everyone or a lot of people went that way was because it looked like his output was going to be pretty high for that value, right? So 6.5, and we were kind of looking at that as a ceiling. I think Bailey is very limited in terms of a ceiling, and I worry because of how dynamic he is. I worry when all these Champions League games come crashing round, how many minutes he's going to get. And also, if we've got some tough away games in the Champions League, he's going to be focused really heavily on coming off the bench. And I worry about injuries with Bailey. He's not got a great track record anyway.
He's someone who I felt like, start of the season, I was like, I'll go for Nkunku. And it was like, I can't have both because I felt like they're both waiting for a hospital pass. And I know that's harsh to say, but I feel like Bailey for me is probably the best 6.5 if he was going to play. And I said the same shit about Nkunku, and look what happened. I'm selling him. So it's kind of like, when I was selling him, I was like, yeah, I need to relax here. I was like, I can't go from one like this to another like that. And I have Rogers. I like him. What was I going to do? Bench Rogers on my knees if I bought him?
Of course.
So I didn't in the end. But what do you think about
it makes it worse,
Watkins
right?
then?
With your style, it makes it worse. If you play Bailey and you bring him in and he gets crocked, you've got nobody else coming off the bench, or
because my team doesn't even have a bench. Like my
so like my situation with Foden, it was okay. Jacob Murphy's coming in off the bench. Okay, it didn't work out, but it could have.
And the vice captaincy landed nicely on Son.
Right, now into the big discussion, the forwards. Now, I'm probably going to get chastised by Villa fans here because I have a very controversial opinion on this, and I think John Duran is a better player than Ollie Watkins. Now, massive statement. I do appreciate that. Okay, and I was on the only one on the Villa bandwagon to sell Ollie Watkins in the summer. I think we would have got massive money for him. And to be honest, if you actually break it down, sit there and watch him week in, week out, he misses so many chances. It's frightening. And you can say, yes, he gets in the positions, he gets the chances, he does, his movement's excellent. But John Duran is a class player. Every time he comes on, he looks like he's going to score. He's pretty much any team in the Premier League would be absolutely blessed to have him. He's top class. And I think, I'm not sure, because Mr. Emery is very loyal to the players that put in a shift for him. But with the Champions League coming round, I've got a sneaking suspicion that they're really going to be splitting minutes all over the place, which makes it very, very, very difficult to go with one of them.
So you can't really, it's not like you're going to think maybe Duran plays Champions League, Watkins plays the league, or vice versa. It kind of makes both a bit of a hard avoid till we see more, right?
I think
buying them this week, like you'll get the game week free fixture for Watkins, but you don't know what it looks like on the other side with games every 3 days.
Nobody else can do what Rogers does. Nobody else can do it in that team.
So you think he's like actually consistent? Because it does feel like we were like learning a lot about him. Just even in game week 1, the big learning then was that his expected minutes were so high, and when you needed the winner and Duran came on and got it, in that game, he was, I guess, basically like the one that stayed on. Like you needed a goal to win, and he stayed on. Then in the second game against Arsenal, he was the big threat. So when you were, I don't think you were here when I said like we're trying to find out if Rodgers is all fart and no poo. I think you missed that part.
It's a good way of putting it, but I think if you sit there and take the stats away from it, watch it with your eyes, watch how he plays. He's an exciting prospect. He could score. He could definitely got the chance to score goals, and he's put some good passes in. And like I say, the movement and just the way he ghosts away from people and just pops up in spots. I think he's only going to get better. He's only going to get better the more he plays and the more games he gets involved with. But yeah, we'll see the John Duran, Ollie Watkins. So I can't really see that too well.
Yeah, let me tell you, there's another slide with the numbers. I think those are probably, the numbers are the most useful. So it's really just to show that in the limited time they've been on the pitch, Duran especially, he's kind of had 2 big chances, same as Watkins, 3 shots in the box, 2 for Watkins, shots on target, 1 each, 5 touches in the box each. But Duran's made 9 final third passes and a through ball to Watkins 2. Now, last season, Watkins was getting a lot of assists, and a lot of them were FPL assists. He was winning penalties. Maybe you wouldn't call them real assists, and like maybe that's not sustainable, like how Chelsea got a lot of penalties last year. Like, will that happen again kind of thing, right? So that I found fascinating, because is it game state or like what is it? Because like Duran has played for such a limited time in comparison. You were gushing his praises. But in that limited time, he's pretty much like how is Watkins not getting more chances in the more time?
It is partly game state. You're right. It is. You can't just look at it and be blind to the fact that, you know.
And it's a smaller sample size, like we said, right? Like this is like literally there's nothing in it. But that's why I want to know more from the eye test. I want you to add the context and the visual of what you saw as a Villa fan rather than numbers that are so small a sample.
But also, I mean, we haven't got them on here, but if you look at the back end of last season as well, for the short time that he played, his output was huge again. So his output was absolutely huge when he came off the bench. Now, it is game state. Of course it is. You know, you're chasing games, you need goals, balls going forward, all of that stuff. There's all that. Teams are sitting back trying to hold results against Villa because they are a good side. They're playing some good stuff. I think they showed that against Arsenal. I did tell you they would get turned over 2-0, and what happened? They lost 2-0, pretty standard. Ollie Watkins missed chance. Look, that chance he missed, Watkins.
Yeah, I will be honest. Like, I think it was the header was. I think the header was actually harder. I think the first one, right, where he got through, I couldn't believe it. Like that was like by itself. That was the one that was like I think 0.8 xg, like similar to a penalty, basically.
I mean, it was
the one that got saved. Like I think that was the harder one, and fair play. Like at 0-0, that save, like world class. But the one that was just like it would have gone in any other day for him. Like that was crazy, right? So everything could have changed at those 2 pivotal moments in that match. I think your fixtures going forwards are better though, right? That's the thing.
Yeah, and I think basically, I mean, what I predict with Duran and Watkins is this, right? And it's simply that maybe against the harder opposition, he might go Duran for the fact that he's better at taking chances when they come. So those limited chances that he might get, he might take, and he's not going to put all of his eggs in beating Man City away, that kind of thing. And maybe
if last season's data, by the way, just so you
know. Okay, cool. If they draw some big ones in the Champions League, then Duran may feature in that, and just kind of, because the other big thing about this as a Villa fan that you've got to look at is the new format is, what is it? So there's 32 teams in this Champions League. So there's 32 teams in it, which is the same as before, correct? So there's 32 teams, but it's one big league. You play 8 games, and then the top 24 go into the playoffs. No, there's the top 8 go through automatically, and then 9 to 24 go into the playoff games. So as a big Emery lover, as a Villa fan, of course, you got to be right. He is probably, and this again is a controversial opinion, he's probably targeting finishing in that 9 to 24 slot, maybe missing out on the Champions League, but getting into the Europa, which he's won multiple times. So might be a little bit of that going on. Let's see these figures then. How's he looking?
Yeah, so this actually, I don't know why I put Ezri Konsa in here, but
yeah,
Yeah, that is quite interesting. You had 2 goal involvements.
Yep.
Obviously, Duran and Rodgers had 6 and 4, but they had lower expected goal involvement. So this is obviously 38 weeks of data. Like, obviously, some of them had less starts. Like Duran, though, you can see here, that is a lot of appearances, right? 23 appearances last season. So 462 minutes. How would you predict that then, based on what you've just been saying, to increase?
I mean, if you look at it pre-season, all the noise was he was going to be sold. So you are kind of looking at it as if to say he's a not wanted kind of part of it, I guess. I think that was more him. He wants first team. He wants to be playing. He feels he's good enough to play, and I agree. I think it's fantastic. So he's battered down the door. He didn't get the move even after the West Ham situation. Did you see that?
I remember, and he kind of, when he celebrated after the goal, he was basically saying, like, in the match, like, yeah, don't worry. Like, I thought at that point, that's it. Like, he's not going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But when you look at it, I think ultimately what I'm trying to tell you is that just to avoid them both. But that's
unless something changes, right? So, like,
we don't know enough. We just don't know enough.
Something changes. If something changes, that's different.
Correct.
But with the assist, I think that's the part I found interesting. Again, it's a small sample size, but I just found it a bit weird that in such a small number of minutes, Duran was the one who'd actually made like the 9 final third passes compared to Watkins 2. I feel like, maybe it is game state, as you say, but again, something there just doesn't add up for me. So I don't know. But Rodgers seems to be, what you're saying, a good shout, and he's not just a bandwagon. So if there are bandwagons, the bandwagons are probably Madueke and Smith Rowe.
Yeah.
As opposed to Rodgers. Rodgers feels like there should be something coming soon. Like, we are excited. He's one of those players where, similar to like how I always talk about Saka each season, not to make it about Arsenal, but every year people tell me that, oh, like, he outperformed his numbers. He won't have the same underlying numbers. But in the following season, which was last year, he actually underperformed his numbers, but he still beat his previous output. So every year his outputs got better. And I think with these young players, similar with Duran and Rodgers, like, you do expect to see them improve and learn and grow. So I think people never seem to account for that. And that's why, despite loving analytics, it's nice to talk to you more just from the perspective of a football fan who loves football and you watch your team, because there's stuff you can pick up on. And if you can take a bet against the masses or the models, or you think your idea of how many minutes someone will get is more, or a change in system or tactics or role means there's an opportunity, you'll get there first a few weeks before any kind of model catches up, because they'll have such a weighting to the previous historical data that it won't spot those changes immediately. So I'd love to know if that comes into your thinking, because I think we've had a good chat about Aston Villa, nearly 20 minutes. And we'll obviously talk about them a lot more, I'm sure, in the Q&A as well as we go.
For sure.
We've talked to, Watkins is up here as well for the predicted points. We just keep going. We talk about the fixture runs a bit now before we take the live Q&A, and Villa will come back to, as you know. So this is just the next kind of 5 game weeks, game week 3 to 7. These were teams you mentioned, and obviously Aston Villa we've talked about. But I know that the likes of Everton and Chelsea you were keen to discuss. I've kind of shown the FDR for both attacking fixtures only and defensive. But I must say to the podcast viewers, the numbers are pretty similar. It's like 9 goals for Villa, 8.6 for Everton, 8.5 for Chelsea, all of them about 1 clean sheet. So although there's rankings, I think this is where I want your context applied, and love to know why you are looking at these teams, because I imagine you mentioned their fixtures because you have plans for assets from these teams. And I know Calvert-Lewin is one of your ones to watch, right? Just to put it out there.
Only from the fact that obviously the fixture run's good, he's on penalties, there's all that element of it. But there's actually a curveball I'm going to throw at you a little bit after last night as well. And I don't know whether you saw the Everton or caught any of it, but this Unjai looks pretty good. So he looks pretty smoky. And I think with the way they've started, they're going to have to potentially throw him in. So he started off in the middle and then he pushed him out wide and he looked brilliant out wide. So I think that is somebody we need to look at from Everton. It's just a watch list situation. It's one of those. I think when you've got teams that don't necessarily score big goals like Everton, but they've got a good fixture run, with my play style, I can bring one of the cheaper options in and I can then give it a little bit of a go, knowing the fact that actually, if it doesn't work out, I've got other players to switch into. I don't feel like I have to immediately get them back out. So that's kind of the nice bit from me. Chelsea, well, I mean, who's going to play, right?
So what about Madueke if we start there? Because, like obviously, like he was someone I considered, and I love the fixtures for Chelsea. That's why I had Nkunku. He was a 6.4. He'd had a price drop. He rose when Nkunku dropped.
Yep.
What do you think about the mass ownership there? Like 500,000 people must have bought him in already, right? So, like,
I think it's a bit of a flash in the pan, to be honest with you. I think this Wolves side, as a Villa fan, I think this Wolves side are going to struggle this year. It usually takes them a little while to get going anyway, but I think the Wolves side will struggle. But no, he basically scored the same goal 3 times. Do you know what I mean?
That is something I wanted to add because the XG was like 0.54. He got a hat trick. It was the same goal. Like, I don't comprehend how an opponent can let you just keep going and do the same thing, the exact same move. Now, fair play to them for executing it. And I do think Madueke is a baller. Like, he's someone who would be fun to own in an FPL team. He's very much that ex-lively. But the minutes and the, how often you're going to see those starts kind of worries me.
Yeah, I mean, have you got any plans to get Palmer?
So actually, maybe let me see if I got my FPL team. Let me share my screen real quick.
Yeah.
So I think next week that is kind of my plan. That was part of why I wanted to catch the price changes on Nkunku and downgrade him Smith Rowe, because I needed the money in the future week if I do end up downgrading Isak, and I want João Pedro, but I don't want the bright fixture this week. With that money, I would be looking to potentially get out of Newcastle altogether next week, sell both Gordon and I think I've got my team here. In fact, it's actually saved as Palmer Pedro. So this is the week, as you saw, with Smith Rowe bought in for Nkunku to free up some money, right? Yeah. See, this thinks I've only got 0.8, but because I did it early, obviously I've got the million.
Yeah.
So here the plan would be to sell both Gordon and Isak for Pedro and Palmer.
Okay. Yeah.
And then that's obviously after the international break, right? Smith Rowe still on the bench, as you can see. So for someone who never has a cover on the bench, I guess at least it's a cheaper cover than Nkunku. Yeah. And it gives me a reason to now play Rodgers. So whereas I was benching him the first 2, now I'm like, okay, I can play him. And he's the guy who I'm going to play with constant every week because, again, I can't trust Hall. So I don't plan to sell Barco or Hall. And I kind of have Hall and Smith Rowe just in case something goes wrong. And I think I'm going to try and limp through these weeks. So obviously game week 3, game week 4, and game week 5. And I think those teams like that I have, like bar injuries, should get through. This week's a bit rough. I will have 2 free transfers by this week again. Maybe even 3 free transfers. So but the Saka Haaland here is rough. So there is question marks about, do I go to a Watkins den, home against Wolves? Do I go for get rid of Saka that week? So there's thoughts there. And then I think reality is by game week 6, I'll likely have the wild card, because even though on paper it looks okay, like I've got Hall, he's a problem. Like I want to, I don't really want Smith Rowe, as I mentioned. I just did it for the price.
Yeah.
And then Barco is a problem. Yes, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that I could keep going if I get to game week 6 and things look okay?
Yeah.
Or do you think that I do need to this is if I go the Palmer route, right? Palmer Pedro route.
Why not? If it looks okay, and
I guess if no one gets injured or banned, why? Yeah, then I can use all these free transfers that I'm. So I guess one thing we've not talked about is I keep clicking forward, but the only transfers I have planned are the 2 for next week. So then game week 5 I get one again. Game week 6 I get another one again.
Yep.
So I could fix things, as you say, as time goes.
Yep.
So then that kind of leads nicely to the next part of the conversation, because we've talked about the fixtures for Chelsea. We talked, so Palmer is in my thoughts because of that.
Yeah.
Calvert-Lewin's interesting because I want to get rid of Muniz, so I hadn't considered him. So why don't you tell us a bit more? I know we're talking about Everton in general, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about what your thoughts are on Calvert-Lewin specifically? Because I think, do I have a watch list slide? Yeah, so...
Yeah, it's just a couple floating around. And I think that quite an interesting one at the top, Brereton Diaz. Obviously, it's he's down as a midfielder.
But playing as like a front 2, right?
Yeah, definitely. And looking lively, to be fair. He did well at the end of last season. Obviously, different team. But yeah, I think all of these people, the thing I love about FPL more than anything is when you pick somebody like a Brereton Diaz, like a Dominic Calvert-Lewin, that is a big differential, and they just run with it, and then everyone's playing a little bit of catch up with them. I'm not saying it always comes off, of course it doesn't, but the reality is going with the mass pick is so boring, isn't it? It is so boring.
I do think that's so. I have him in a lot of draft leagues. So Brereton Diaz was a big pick for me early because he was someone who was in the preseason. I showed the Rob stats. I think Rob FPL, Rob stats FPL or something, but I've forgotten the name. But in the preseason episodes, he had Brereton Diaz very high up in the expected goal involvements on the spread betting market. So
yeah, he will be involved in a lot of goals. He certainly will. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin, well, with that run of fixtures, if they're going to score and he's going to be playing centre forward, he's got to start scoring goals. And he goes on runs. He does go on runs. So this is...
So let's talk about the fixtures, right? It's got Bournemouth home this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So again, imagine someone was doing that move, right? Isak to Calvert-Lewin and Kunku to Palmer. I think it's a week early to sell Isak, but obviously 500,000 people disagree with me.
Yep.
Maybe I'm putting too much faith in that Tottenham home game being a final big hurrah for me before I cash in and try to spread the money more. But his other games, obviously Aston Villa away, I don't think that's great. Then he's got Leicester away, Crystal Palace home, Newcastle home. So I think over the next 5, they're not the best, but as an enabler, as you say, maybe it's nice to have players like Brereton Diaz and Calvert-Lewin as alternatives to what maybe the majority will pile into. So for you, you've got Chris Wood. Is that someone who you're thinking of potentially moving on soon then for a Calvert-Lewin or for a Watkins? I don't know. Well, to be fair, he said no to the Villa strikers earlier.
Yeah, no to the Villa strikers. I'm sticking with Rodgers. I tend to, more often than not, stick with one player in the forward areas from a team. I know it was always quite interesting. Mariner used to talk about, obviously, double-ups. Double-ups in attack, pairs, what the outputs of all of that. But I tend to find for me, it's a bit feast or famine. When it doesn't go well, it just feels like doubly depressing, doesn't it? You know what I mean? You look at your phone and you haven't got to catch the game and there's no goals and you just got no hope.
This is my bench boost for when the Shrewsbury Town Cup game got delayed for the weather or something, and then I was going to bench boost in Gameweek 18 with a Leeds double game week, and then I did it anyway despite the single because I'd set up for it. Yeah. And then they lost 1-0 and it was 2-2-2-2 just all the way across my bench on the bench boost, and I was like, oh shit. I feel that with my team now. I went very heavy and saying the first game week when Shark got the red card, I was just looking at my Newcastle players and I've captained Isak, I've got Gordon, and I'm like, damn, what's going on?
Murphy.
That's painful.
Yeah, Murphy, and he got hooked because of the red card, and it's just no, the pain set in. I've got Hall, Murphy. Thank God there was a clean sheet, right? That would have been a miserable experience.
Especially before the benching, Jesus.
Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I'm genuinely looking at game week 5. Now, again, Chris Wood, it turns a little bit, but also I'm worried about Awoniyi. Is that his name? I always say it
Taiwo,
right.
Yeah,
Taiwo Awoniyi. Yeah, I'm terrible. Sorry,
Taiwo.
Awoniyi,
yeah.
He's got to be watching, surely, so apologies. Leicester, game week 5. I fancy that, I really do. I think that Calvert-Lewin, he's got to turn his form around, and he goes on runs, like I say. So which I think Leicester away is a great game for them to just pick up a little bit of momentum, and then they're notoriously slow starters, Everton. They have been for years, notoriously. So I think game week 5, I'm looking at that. That's a big option. Chris Wood, genuinely.
It is game week 3 for you now, right? I'm just looking at the team.
Looking at it.
Foden,
Yeah, so that was game week 2. Game week 3. So basically, Foden is gone. I've got Palmer in.
Palmer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got Palmer in there as captain. And then we have Rodgers in for Murphy. So that's there. And pretty much, I'm just going to fly with that strong 3 defence. I would say that's going to carry me right into a wild card. Gvardiol, White, Trent. I don't think I would even comprehend putting anyone else in. And then Mitchell's there in case Palace start to find a bit of form, because he's actually been quite threatening, both him and Manol's on the other side. But the reality is, if they pick up a bit of clean sheet form, I may chuck him in over a midfielder even at times, depending, because he's literally playing in that back five, bombing forward. There's a good chance of a good output there with a clean sheet. Crystal Palace were good at the end of last season. So, yeah, I fancy that. Hall's my only problem, really, in that whole team, I think, now.
I think Hall, like, I'm glad I didn't. I almost went with Hall and Kwanzaa. That would have added to my misery for sure. But let's, I think on that note then, because it feels like I'm someone who has Haaland now. And when we looked at my Game Week 5 team with Saka and Haaland in there, I'm really struggling for a captain. I guess if I buy Palmer by that point, right, I could go there away at Bournemouth, but I do think Bournemouth are tough. I think Newcastle showed that it's not just a walkover game. Chelsea maybe have too much for them. So, there is that. So there is a lot of talent when you spend that kind of money, if they figure it out. And I'm currently going to say that I'll go out on a limb, and I think they can get fourth this season if they get it right. Like last season, we were talking about, when they're back, all this stuff. But maybe this is the season that it clicks for them. So with that in mind, am I crazy to be thinking about that kind of world? Like selling, you don't have either, right? So I feel like you're braver than me in general. I'm then going to consider selling Haaland, right? Maybe that is my way out, and then I can get Salah for a captaincy, right? So maybe something like that.
Let me throw in the Haaland for this, because obviously you're discussing that captaincy in that game week. 15.1 million that he is now, or 15. I mean, that's going to have busted a few plans to maybe get to him as well. So if you've got it, obviously you're not going to get rid of him at this stage. But do you really, genuinely, obviously with my game style, it's slightly different, but 15.1 million, like he won't even be the highest point scorer this season, I don't think.
He wasn't last year, right? But I think that's because, or was he? I'm thinking of someone else. I'm talking about Salah because people kept talking. Yeah, you're right. But people keep thinking Salah's like, regressing and getting less points. But the reality is, like, with stuff like AFCON or like injuries and not playing, like we don't account for those seasons. So I do think for me, if I sold him, I do agree with you that your style, you wouldn't spend that 15 million. But if I sold him, I would be getting a Salah out of it. Going back to what you said at the start of the episode about having that captain and how your best finish, that top 2K finish, was the only year where you just captain the same person all year. And normally, obviously, that's not how you play, and you take much more aggressive moves. So I do think that Salah could do better. And I think with the signing of Chiesa, though, others will argue that his minutes are at risk because he's there as a backup. He's getting older. I would argue Chiesa can play across the line, and he's just a low-risk signing. And let's see how he beds in. And, there's talk of Darwin wanting out. I don't see him leaving before the window closes. I've got Diego Jota. For now, I'm just going to ride that train. But if I can get to Salah, and that's why you see in my current plan, right, on FPL team, I've gone for Palmer, right? So I've kept Haaland and I've gone for Palmer. I've not done that move to kind of, because I have an option where I could sell Saka and get to Salah, or I sell Gordon and get to only up to Palmer. So it's kind of like, that's the decision I need to make.
Let's go mind at rest with Salah. The reality is Chiesa's come in because as soon as Salah goes to Saudi in the summer, which is going to happen, isn't it? Everyone knows it's going to happen. It's pretty much set. I'll be shocked if he doesn't. That money, whatever they do or however they go about it, that money is going to be on the table. But they've jumped early for Chiesa. They've got him in, and they're going to basically try and groom him for the season into as much of a Salah replacement as he can be. I still don't think he'll stand up. I think they'll end up, putting Jota out wide, or
it's low risk though, right? It's a low risk move from them. The price is crazy. Like, just 2 years ago he was like £100 million player and stuff, and those injuries and kind of just seems that somehow he's gone for that price, and it's just what a nice little low risk hunt, right? And why not?
What a person to bring on when you need a winner 20 minutes to go. Do you know what I mean? He's not. He may have these injuries, but 20 minutes out of him a game, 25 minutes. He's got the experience of big games. Champions League, all of that. He'll be good. He'll be
So
good.
who do you prefer? Because I think we want to get to the Q&A. I won't talk about the transfer window anymore. We're definitely throwing that one out the window. But yeah, that one we'll talk about in the international break when it's actually closed, and then we can talk more about what the impact we think is going to be and plan ahead for anyone maybe who's wildcarding for Game Week 4 next week. But Liverpool, right? So they have Man United away, Nottingham Forest home, Bournemouth home, Wolves away, Crystal Palace away, Chelsea home. Just reading it out for the podcast listeners. Yep. Man City have West Ham away, Brentford home, Arsenal home, Newcastle away, Fulham home, Wolves away. What do you think about these from an attack and defense point of view? The FDR kind of has Liverpool top for both attack and defense, but it's 10.1 goals versus 9.5 and 1.1 clean sheet versus 1.
I think you got to get out of your head Jurgen Klopp Liverpool defense. I think you've got to get out of your head. That's the hard bit, right? Because for seasons we've banged on about how they haven't got a clean sheet and this, that, and the other, and they're frustrating because they should be getting more clean sheets against poorer teams. But now with this more possession-based style, I think they're going to keep a hell of a lot more clean sheets. And I think going into a run like this, I'm more inclined to go Liverpool over City in terms of defensive assets.
So what if, let's say, someone like us, we both have Trent. When I do look at like certain paths I could take, there is that double up with Robertson. I don't think personally I'd get Robertson over Trent, especially for a team like yours where you don't even have Haaland or Salah. Mm-hmm. And for a team like mine where I only have one of the two for now, I'll definitely have Trent. Otherwise, why not have both premiums for me in my head? Mm-hmm. So for me, it'll be a double up. So would you suggest that might be an option? So if I don't get Salah at all and I kind of have that Jota, Trent, and Robertson trio.
I've actually toyed around, even though obviously I said earlier, those big three hitters in defence, I've toyed around with Gvardiol for Robertson for that fact, really, that I think Liverpool are going to be more consistent defensively, even more so than Man City, to be fair. Which seems crazy, and I don't know where the whole Kyle Walker, Rico Lewis thing is going to go.
I was going to say, so on the City side, would you say that then maybe like it is a kind of Gvardiol situation? Lewis might be a fire to put out?
Yeah, I do. I think
you still don't like that. I know when Peter said he was going to get Lewis last week, you messaged me. It wasn't for you. It was kind of like you were all riding on that one fixture against Ipswich, you felt.
Hate that move. Yeah, I didn't like it at all. And I think, obviously, at what point is Walker going to come back against, a pacey left winger? Are they just going to bring Walker in and let Gvardiol what he did at the end of last season, just basically roam and be free? He hasn't really done that in the first two games, which makes him not as attractive as he was because Lewis is playing, right? So
that's why it's an avoid for me. I think I kind of feel like I'd pile into City in Game Week 6. So right now I'm like, is there an exit? Like it might be that because this week he's my captain, and I think it's a good time to look at the poll. I put a poll saying who you captaining this week in the chat. And we have had 30 votes. Haaland is 70%, Salah 10%, Palmer 10%, Saka 10%. So we basically have 3 people captaining Saka, 3 Palmer, 3 Salah. And then the other 21 are captaining Haaland. So I think for this fixture, obviously, I'm not selling him. The following one, home against Brentford. I know Brentford's given them trouble in the past, but again, I don't see it as a fire that week, despite Liverpool and Salah having Nottingham Forest home. I think I'd rather be focusing on a Palmer that week. But then that Bournemouth home fixture for Liverpool. I know people will joke. I remember, I think I was in Budapest with my wife, and I was in a nice afternoon tea in a really luxurious hotel, and goals just kept going in, man. It was like 9-0 Liverpool, and Salah got no return that day. And I just remember I couldn't believe it. So people would joke about that, but that is the week for me. Like Arsenal home, Newcastle away. I am going to get rid of Haaland, and then I might wildcard soon after that. I think that's the week for me. That Arsenal home fixture, I just have to go against the grain there, I think. But you don't even have him. So my question for you is more about someone like, say, Foden, because we don't know his role in this system. If he comes in and starts playing regularly again, obviously you had the cold, you bought him, so clearly you fancy his chances.
Yeah.
Would you go back? So I know you've sold him because obviously at the moment it's a fire, but does that almost put you off going back?
A little bit. I think the thing about City, right, is as we always chat, pet roulette defensively. It's stabilised with a couple of defenders. I would say Gvardiol looks about as nailed as you can with a Pep defender. But more intriguing to me than Foden seems to be Savinho. I've really enjoyed watching him the first 2 games. I think you've always got to be careful with Pep's comments because he says one thing and then does something completely different. But I think if you look at his chance creation last year and you look at it this year, this guy's a baller. And ultimately, City need Haaland having supply. I don't think he had enough supply in big games last year. And I know they won the league and I know all that, yeah, whatever. But I think they weren't as dominant as maybe they should have been. And this guy could be the difference. So I'm really keen to maybe go Savinho. But again, get rotated back out. Who knows, right?
So I have him in some draft leagues. Like I picked him in some differential pick last week under 7 mil, some other creators. And I got very lucky with the Foden illness. But I think if we see, like for me, what I will say about him is he kind of feels like a Mahrez regen, right? Even wearing that same, is it the 26 he's wearing, right? And like,
I think it is. Yeah.
And some of those movements, I'm just looking at it and I'm like, damn, like, have they literally found a Mahrez regen? So I don't know. He's very exciting. We got Doku. I know he's the same price. People might look at him too. I'm not so keen on that side of things. I thought Grealish was going to have a bigger input this year. He was having a great preseason. Pep was talking him up. Ended up injured, didn't arrive, and barely appeared off the bench since, despite making it both times.
Yeah.
Long term, I think it is for me Savinho. He's the one that, if I can go there at that price, it just something about it is so exciting.
If he totally as close as you can to cements a spot, even if he's playing 60 minutes and get hooked at that price in a City attack, I think you've got to have it.
And I hate to say this, but obviously it's unfair on other time zones. But like, as Man City is such a big team and it's one of the teams that's more likely to have early team news and team leaks pre-deadline, in my brain, I'm like, if I heard he didn't start and I have him over a fixture run where they play maybe close to the deadlines some of the weeks, then I could just bench him if I have someone who I know is definitely going to start and is like a Rodgers on my bench. So,
or Emil Smith-Rowe.
Yeah, right now. But that's because it was Rodgers. So I had Rodgers instead of like a Winks. So he was like my 8th man. And then now what's happened is he's become the 7th man because I liked what I saw so much. And Smith-Rowe's become the 8th man despite costing more. That's how funny it is. But we pray for the Rodgers points. Seeing as we're so far in, I think we're going to thank all the members and then just go to Q&A. I've started about 14 questions in the chat as well. So we'll take those before we get out of here. And then we're going to raid some other content creators' channels and tell them we sent you, please. Also, just a quick moment to say, this is crazy, but like there's like 400 live people watching, which I think is the most we've ever had. Like there's 4 times what we had when like Late Riser was on the channel and stuff. So Luke, I hope that doesn't make you cringe because I know you're not really on X. Like you obviously watch the channel, you're one of the audience yourself, and then I've kind of roped you in on the first day I streamed on X as well. And I'll be honest, I didn't think there'd be these kind of numbers. I feel like maybe 10, 20 extra people would watch on X. So yeah,
it can only go up with better guests, right? It can only go up from here.
So yeah, if you're new this week, obviously as I mentioned, Trigger Lips is coming soon. We have Fran. I've talked to everyone's coming, but please do consider subscribing if you're watching on X and you're not on YouTube. I'm like 90 subscribers away from 3,000. We got to 2,000 2 years ago in the preseason. So if we can get to that 3,000 milestone, it will mean the world. I will also finalize the logo soon. I promise now that there's so many viewers. Locked In FPL, this is just a placeholder logo as we rebrand from Net That Hall in our 5th season. And for anyone who's new, I expect to have guests every week on a Wednesday, learn about their playstyle, how they got into FPL, and the key topics of that week. And that's just a quick thank you to everyone who's a member on YouTube and Patreon. And then I've got all the questions lined up. So any final questions, get them in the chat, and we will timestamp the Q&A. So our master key holders, Greenback Golf himself, he is here, number 1 man. Gary Horwood, David Harrison, Nehal Kulkarni, Colin Bugler. We have Lion Pedersen, FPL Sparta, and Tiggy Taylor. We have our key holders, Podner, Kevin Rose, Blonde, FPL Teacher, Donny FPL, Tom Gorsuch, Lindsay O, Akshay, Dom, Claire FPL, Tursk, Scafrine, Harry Not Kane, Neil, Benjamin Lockwood, Big Mike, FPL Discomfort, Grady, Jasper and Singh, FPL Eric, BW Splitter, and the FPL Juice Show. Last but not least, our Patreons. Thank you to Elron, FPL California, Mike Burke, Draft Alchemy, and Dr. Green Thumb. So yeah, thank you everyone. We're about an hour and 10 minutes in. First time I'm going to say if you've enjoyed the episode, if we made you laugh, if you've laughed with us, at us, learned something, been entertained, do consider supporting us with that like and subscribe, please. You can find us on Spotify. Any reviews on there would be appreciated if you're on pod. But I think we're going to just kind of go to the Q&A. I have a question from the members. So as a member, if you are a member, all the new members from last week, let me know if you can't get into the Discord. DM me on X at FPL Nima. You can automatically join the Discord server with about 40 of us in there. All the members send your questions in advance. And we'll try to do some more of the voice hangouts this season, which we've not done for a while. But while I was stalling for time to do the timestamp for these live chat shoutouts, we will now get the first question up from Discord. It's actually from Dr. Green Thumb. And then after that, let's go straight to all the live chat YouTube questions, if that sounds good to you, Luke.
Sounds good.
So let's see. So in Discord, the questions we have. So Dr. Green Farm, it's actually quite a complex question from him. So we will try to be quick on this and then just reply via text in Discord. So they have started really well, the best they've ever started this year. They're currently at 138,000 rank after 2 weeks. How do I stay there? Make sure I have the two big captains covered. And then they bench boosted in game week 1. They were going to wildcard to target Liverpool and Villa and get rid of their bad players, then hold transfers to react to the swings after. They just say any idea is appreciated. I know it's a ridiculous question, and sorry if you can't answer it on air. So we will answer some of it offline, maybe for voice note. It's quite complex, and they've shared their team as well. But based on what you saw, mate, what do you think? Because I think if I was 138k and you want to be super aggressive, you've already bench boosted anyway.
Yeah,
I would probably wildcard out the bench boost, right, and target those Villa and Liverpool fixtures as kind of they've been the main content of the show, right, those teams. And I would just go for it because especially with the way you roll transfers now, like using that wildcard instead of the transfers, you should hopefully not need to make another move for 2-3 weeks. So you could end up getting to a point where by the time people are wildcarding in game week 6, maybe you have so many transfers, you can get close to people's wildcard teams, like with just free transfers. So I would try and keep riding the high personally. I don't know if you would do differently.
Yeah, I think
that high up this early.
I think it's difficult because obviously, as we always say, there's only so much information we've had from 2 game weeks. So to then fly straight into the wild card and go for it. But if you wanna stay there, guaranteed, well, partially guaranteed for the next 2 game weeks, throw your wild card in, go for it. Just be aggressive, go for it. Target those.
That's what Marina's doing. So Mariner, what did he do? He bench boosted in game week 1, triple captain in game week 2, and he's in the top 100k. I think wild card in game week 3, and he's probably not going to play. So he quit FPL, right? Like he obviously didn't delete his team like Gabriel, but when he realized he was the manager of the that whole mini league, and he needed to pass the administrator rights to me to rebrand to Locked In FPL this season, he had to create a team, and then he knew he was going to have a bad rank on his history, but he wasn't going to play. So then he thought, well, if I'm going to have to play and you've forced me to renew this mini league, I'll just go all out and use all my chips. So he's gone in a totally different angle, but he's not very much in the game mentally. He's not concerned about obsessing over it like we are. He's got more important issues to think about, and we send him our love.
Always.
But let me just, so I've done this Q&A. Let's just a
go.
few more. Yeah, we'll just do quick fire from here. So Catherine had a similar question. We'll answer those in the chat before deadline. Claire FPL game week 3. Play 3-5-2 with Hudson-Odoi versus Wolves and bench the misfiring Muniz, or stick with 3-4-3. So really, do you want to play Hudson-Odoi home against Wolves or Muniz?
If you've got Muniz,
away,
you've got to play Muniz if you got him, right? This is why you got him, these type of fixtures. I don't...
If switch away is the fixture, right? This is the banker. He's looked good as well, I think. So I'd back him over Hudson-Odoi personally, but
the thing I've learned for years, and my kind of golden little thing with this is, if you bought somebody in for a reason, i.e. Muniz, you've looked at that fixture and gone, yeah, I'll have him for that, and then you bench him and he does something, you kick yourself.
You're right. That's why I didn't buy Leon Bailey, right? Because I would have been benching Muniz, and I got Smith Rowe for the price swing solely to bench him, because I was like, if I bench Muniz now, I'll be way more angry his points on the bench than I will Smith Rose, or in your case, Claire, your Hudson-Odoi. Knowing my luck, Hudson-Odoi will haul this week. So
Manise, go. Keep it simple. Go Manise. Yeah, I know Chelsea scored however many past Wolves, but they've got to be better than that. Yeah, go Manise. Stick with it.
Cool. Let's go to the YouTube live questions now. So the first one was from Elron, one of our Patreons. Say, evening, Powell versus Concert. So one thing we've not talked about today is Villa defenders. So I might even timestamp this Villa defenders and then live Q&A, just to also squeeze a bit more juice out of you about Villa. And there's the 4 million fullback, and Dini has been playing, and I just love to know what you think is going to happen there. And obviously, Matson hasn't started yet. Matson was the one I was most excited about preseason, but I'd love to know your thoughts on him, the 4 million player who I've not tried to pronounce because I'll butcher it.
Yeah. So the real world thinking on this, I suppose, is Konsa all day long. He's our best defensive defender. It's as simple as that, and he can play right back. He nearly scored against Arsenal. It's, nearly scored that headed goal. But more importantly, when Matson's up and running, which I expect it to be in a short period of time, we're going to want to attack down that left side. It's kind of Emery's little golden nugget, attacking down that left side. And Konsa's going to play right back and fill into those three. But he's still a threat. And against maybe the better teams, he could well play solidly right back. Moving forward, still got chances. Konsa over Powell all day long.
Fair. And we'll keep going. I've got Konsa. I started Gameweek 1 with him. I almost started with Ben Johnson and Barco. So I'm sure you would have crucified me if I was on air and you saw those two guys on the bench right now. Thank God I have Ezri Konsa to deal with the Lewis Hall problem. I was originally going to bench Pedro Porro in Game Week 3 and 4, I think, Newcastle and Arsenal, but no way. Lewis Hall is on my bench now. So he asked about Powell versus Konsa. He talks about Konsa getting 5 yellows last season. Powell got 1.
Yeah.
They say they would go for Powell. Now, what I will say is the one change we saw in the bonus point system was about challenges won, right? And I think Konsa's numbers were like disgustingly high. So if there was a clean sheet, I expect him to get all the bonus. And with that change in the system, and I think that also kind of accounts for the reason those yellows have come, is because just the sheer number of challenges and tackles that were made was more chance of a yellow or a tactical foul. But that also means that because of the way he's playing, I'll take a few of those -1s in some of the weeks where hopefully are games where you're not going to keep a clean sheet. And then in the games you do keep a clean sheet, I'm hoping those are the ones he gets loads of successful tackles, hoovers up BPS, no yellow card, fingers crossed.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's just our best defender. So I think winning duels, that's what he's all about. And that plays into the bonus point system, as you said, spot on.
Any thoughts on if he might move to right back? I know he started like quite a significant number of games there last season. The manager said he's not needed. Yeah. Could Diego Carlos come in at centre back?
Yeah, he still could. I think, but when Matson's fit, fully fit and firing how Emery wants him to play, I think Konsa goes right back.
Interesting. So when Matson's fully in,
and he just sends him off, especially in the games where you would want an attacking left back or that width, because naturally, obviously, Bailey can give us width the other way, but honestly, he's class, Matson. He's a good player. So I think Konsa will spend probably a good chunk of the season, if not half of it, out right back.
I like the sound of that. Couple of shout outs to Midnight Breakfast. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize they were here live first, but I think that's because their messages were like, it looks like they were like 18 hours before the stream. It says 12:07 a.m. and then the next message is like 7:56 p.m., which is 4 minutes pre-live. So thank you for being there super early. Well, that is my alarm. Midnight Breakfast says, hope Rogers comes good this week. I think he will. And FPL Fardell, good to see you. FPL Fardell, back in the day, they listened to Net That Hall in the early years, and they said they started hoovering up their mini leagues. They were like bottom in Christmas, and in sixth form days, they came top. And then obviously now they're like grown up and adult and at uni. But it's good to see all these years later, Fadil. You're still here, my boy. Fadil. I think it's the former. Couple more comments before we go. So Getty FPL said, will Duran take more minutes off Watkins this season?
Yeah, definitely.
You've already kind of answered this in that section, right? We've timestamped it. If you came late, go to the Villa segment. That was the main segment of the show. Solid 20 minutes on everything apart from the defenders, which we just spoke about.
Yeah.
Garnish asks, Isak for Watkins? Not for me this week, maybe next week, but I'd still rather go all the way to Pedro based on what you've said. And the additional fixtures.
Yeah.
So what else do we have? Trigger Talks FPL was talking about Isak, I think. He might not drop this week, only minus 49%, and the amount of wildcards is slowing down his price for he should survive. Yeah, so I was almost willing to keep Nkunku if it wasn't for a price change just to play Rodgers. So yeah, I'm not selling Isak if there's not a price change either. So last season, Getty had 3 Villa, got off to a flying start, had Watkins, Diaby, Torres. Good times, only on Rodgers at the moment. Nice little anecdote. Marino, nice kit. Thank you so much. This was actually a gift from him. I appreciate that. Maybe he means yours. You reckon in the Aston Villa kit, right? Is that a training jersey or is that a cup game?
Oh, this is the shirt they wore in the 1982 Rotterdam European Cup final before I was born. But
Wow, I love that.
So this is the.
It looked like a cup final kind of shirt for a second. I was like, wait a second, that is kind of nice. Yeah, you're right.
Shirt.
We're both wearing final shirts. So Marino got me this when he found out that it's been a shirt I wanted all my life. 1998 World Cup was like one of the times I really got into football. As an Iranian as well, like we beat the USA 2-1. And I was in the streets of Kensington in London. There's Iranians everywhere going crazy. It was a wild time. It really got me into football. And obviously, Michael Owen's goal against Argentina. And this kit, the Zidane 10, the final against Brazil. Like, so thank you so much, Marino, for the kit. Trigger will be on. Okay, he's gone. What else do we have? So Nehal just says, hello, Nima. Everyone is super reactionary this year since the pricing is so competitive.
It's a good point.
Seeing a lot, like there's been like 80 price drops in the last 3 days, and the transfers out page, like there's like 100k of like 20 different players being sold. Like it's a lot of activity compared to normal. They've done well.
We obviously don't know exactly how they do these price rises and price drops, but with these, bringing in these more transfers and stuff in terms of stockpiling them, not more, but you can stockpile them. They may have made this a little bit more volatile, just to try and get some players jumping around rather than holding as many transfers. I think that there could be a bit of legs in that, but that's only speculation.
My favorite thing is I personally thought that I've got friends who like miss deadlines all the time. I thought this would kind of favor them because then when they come back, they have a lot of moves, but also favor people who want to plan as well. So it favors both sides. But really now I'm looking like my friends, like the ones who told me like there's people who start with Main who looking to take -4s to sell him. I got guys who sold like their striker last week and they brought in Jesus Christ, they brought in Richarlison, and I'm like, but bro, like why? Like just why? Like, and like, they send me their team, and I'm like, bro, like the team, like 10 out of 11, 12 out of 12, like yeah, they look good, but there's always like this one random crackhead pick, and I'm like, just why? Like just why? So there are still, I've realized, like I was optimistic thinking like the more casual managers who aren't as obsessed and nerdy about the game as us would like miss deadlines and have transfers. They're actually, this is when they're most active. If they have a bad game week 3, 1 million of them are not logging in again in game week 4 after a 2-week break. And so will be the case in October, in November. Every international break, we're going to lose like 1 million, 2 million people. If it's a bad scoring average week, boom, another 2 million gone this time. So yeah, I think that's the other thing I would say to the people who are asking about what to do when they've had such a good start. I would also sometimes personally, I try not to force things because my mentality is like to not look at rank at the beginning for 10 weeks. Like I don't look at mini leagues till like the last 5 to 10 weeks. Like I'm always trying to compete with myself, my own previous best. Like I'm looking at like where I was last season and I had like a great game week 1. I think I was like maybe say 600k. And then like by game week 10, I'm still there at like 5-6 million. This season, I started at like 2 million, and I'm like, well, hopefully it's the inverse, actually. I'd rather start lower and slowly work my way up because none of that means anything. So many people have used chips every, I think, 5 points or so, maybe every 10 points or so is like 500,000 rank. So one thing I would say here is that even though people are reactive, this is exactly what's great about this game. Like, I'd like to think that by being patient, by backing the players you pick for the reasons you did, like Muniz against Ipswich, not just selling him. If the things you picked haven't changed, why force these decisions? And I'd rather wait till game week 10, see where the lay of the land is. And then I know whether I'm going to be chasing top 100k the rest of the season, which is my annual goal, or have I had an incredibly better start than normal and I can aim for a loftier height for my, overall finish. So really, I'm always just aiming for top 100k. First few weeks, I don't care. But in all, the reason I say all this, is I do think the casuals will still move aggressively, then they'll quit and they'll come back and then suddenly they'll have loads of moves. So I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff. And I think we'll see a lot of variety in teams based on how many transfers different people have at different times they remember to log back in over the season. So the casuals will have an impact, not just now and when they quit and when they come back. But I honestly think it's going to be one of the most fun seasons in so long. So kudos to them for the price changes and new rules. Let's keep going. So Leon said, I remember Watkins having a similar slow start last season. Then that Brighton game happened. One explosive game and everyone will jump on him. That is true. But I think the question is, do you, like Palmer just had that explosive game, right? And you jumped on him. I might jump on him the following week. So it is true. Like I get that. But how do you identify players and when to jump on them before that? How do you make sure you got those points before the bandwagon arrives?
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, no matter what team they're on, if they've got a good fixture run and they bag something the week before, people are going to react to it, right? They're going to get carried away thinking that they're going to score 4 goals every week for the next 4 weeks kind of scenario. Our brain just goes straight to the pure positive of having that player, and then the fear of missing out, the FOMO as they call it, straight on it. But I think sometimes you got to be a bit more patient than that. It's like, for me, if Watkins goes explosive in one game, my mindset tells me as a Villa fan, that's great, super, but he may well have those chances the next week and miss them all.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, and I think that's kind of my concern. Because I want to, like, say there was the year, one of my best finishes was the Norwich game for West Ham, and Mikel Antonio, I think, got 4 goals, brought him in, captained him. Like, it's just like, it's that kind of thing, right? Like, there must be a Watkins fixture that we think, you know what, all the cards have fallen the right way. Like, let's say you get to later in the group stages, you topped your group, you're definitely qualifying. Let's just say you're certain, like, the managers come out and Unai said, Duran's going to get his well-deserved start tomorrow in Europe or something for the fans. And then you're like, oh, shit, in the league games, like home against Leicester and or Southampton. So, like, I think, yeah, like, I will look for that moment. But for me, still, I'm not going to go to Watkins yet. I'm going to go all the way down to Pedro, I think. And if I'm going to spend the kind of Watkins money, I would still go Havertz despite the fixtures personally. I really rate Havertz this season, so that's what I'm going to say.
Do you have any reservation with João Pedro with Rutter coming in at all?
No, so I wanted Pedro all of pre-season, and I don't know what happened that I ended up stumping up the extra $500,000 for Muniz, and then somehow still cost me for you know what it is? I didn't know what Brighton I wanted, and I wanted Barco to be in place. That's a disaster. And then I wanted to see whether it was Mitoma, Pedro, Minte. I wanted to decide by game week 4 or 5 who it would be.
I think that's fair.
And that's the thing, right? And Mitoma's the one I really want, but I couldn't afford the straight swap. That would have been my ideal move. I would have done Nkunku to Mitoma and maybe bench Mitoma for Muniz this week against Arsenal, and then I would have had him in place, but I was out of that. So then the next option was Minte. And I went Smith Rowe because I've made my bed. I was like, nah, I'm going to go Pedro over Minte. That was my conclusion. That's where I kind of landed, I guess. But we'll keep going. Tiggy Taylor, love this content. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do let me know if you have issues getting into the Discord. Tiggy, thank you for gifting the memberships last week. Getty FPL's on Holland captain. And Tiggy said, Foden's man flu could be that he's not planning to play in the international break and be fully rested for Pep. I have De Bruyne for now. I do like the De Bruyne pick. I think that's quite exciting. I don't know if you have De Bruyne with Haaland, Tiggy, or instead of, but I do think KDB's very exciting. But yeah, that's kind of everything. We're going to get out of here. I want to thank Luke for his time. We've gone for an hour and a half instead of the hour that we normally do. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Luke. Love to get you back at some point this season, hopefully with Robert Ducky next time. Obviously, he came on the show with you last year. And there's 450 people nearly live. This is crazy. I can't believe it. Thank you all for your support. If this is new, if you hate watching, if you're finding it fun or learning something or enjoying the entertainment, please come to YouTube. Help me get to 3,000 subscribers. It's been a long, long journey of 5 years, and I'm just trying to survive and rebrand on my own with guests and friends. And I promise lots of good vibes and, interesting conversations. So let me know any guests you want me to bring on. and we will try to get them on no matter how elusive they are. So yeah, that's kind of my promise to you guys. In terms of you, Luke, is there anything you want to say? Any last thoughts on Villa, maybe specifically? Any FPL thoughts that maybe you've had a new perception since being on the channel tonight? Maybe our conversation, comments in the chat, or are you still kind of pretty set? I know you've used your 2 moves this week, but like, is there anything that's like you're not locked in mentally? Is there anything you want to lock in before we wrap up?
The only thing I want to lock in is it's such a shame that Villa didn't beat Arsenal with that other thumbnail that I sent you for the show. That is such a shame, because it would have just been spot on.
You know what? I'm glad you brought this up. So for anyone who doesn't know, I had promised, and I think it would have been fitting that had Villa won, which I was quite nervous of considering the 6 points they took from us last season, that I would put the Emi Martinez World Cup photo on where he's acting like Randy Shafter is the best way I can put it without being offensive to different groups of people out there. But yeah, Randy Shafter, if you're out there listening, sorry that you're catching strays, buddy. I'm sure they know what I mean in the chat. Thank you, everyone. This was Locked In FPL. You have all been amazing. Please do consider subscribing, as I mentioned, and hit that like button on YouTube. I'm going to send you guys directly to Black Box, as and Mark are live tonight. If you let them know you came from Locked In FPL through Nima, and it's a raid on their channel for Black Box, I would really appreciate it. I want to support every content creator, and in the same way that Juice directed to me and my channels the last few days, I want to do the same for someone else. So I've put a link in the live chat if it works. It looks like I've got too many characters over and it wasn't sending because I put too many of my emojis of my Nima shock face that's available for YouTube members. I'll improve all the production this season. I'm considering moving as well to another streaming software. But now that preseason's over and we've got all the free podcasts live and functioning, international break will give me a good time to up the production again now that there's so many of you viewers here. Thank you. And yeah, let the Black Box guys know you came from this raid and you're raiding the channel. I'm also going to go there and watch it while I finish off a few bits. And thank you, Luke. Thank you, everyone. Good luck in Game Week 3. Enjoy the international break, despite it coming so soon. And we'll be back next Wednesday, and I'll announce the guests very soon. Peace. Up the Villa. I'll say it with you. Thank you for your support, Luke.